The early morning sun barely peeked over the rooftops of the small town, casting a warm, golden light across the narrow streets. Inside a modest cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling flatbread filled the air. Aisha, a young waitress with eyes full of determination and kindness, wiped down the counters for the 100th time that morning. Her worn apron bore faint stains of past meals, each telling a story of long hours and relentless effort. Outside the cafe, a familiar figure hobbled along the uneven cobblestones. Hamid, a crippled beggar with a crutch worn smooth by years of use, paused near the doorway, his eyes scanning the street for anyone who might notice him. Most people ignored him, shuffling past with averted gaze, but Aisha saw him immediately. Without hesitation, she stepped outside, carrying a small plate wrapped in a thin cloth. "Here, Hamid," she said softly, placing it before him. "Eat while it's warm." Hamid's eyes lit up, a rare warmth spreading across his weathered face. "Thank you, Aisha," he murmured, his voice trembling with gratitude. She smiled, brushing off the small thrill of doing good, pretending it was just another routine task. As the morning crowd began to trickle in, Aisha continued her work with quiet diligence, her heart lightened by the simple act of feeding someone who needed it most. Though life had been harsh to her, these small moments of connection reminded her why kindness mattered, even in a world that often seemed indifferent. It was a chilly morning, and a thin fog hung over the streets, curling around the legs of passers-by. Inside the cafe, the clatter of cups and the murmur of customers created a soft hum of daily life. Aisha carefully carried a steaming bowl of lentil soup to Hamid, who sat hunched over on his worn wooden stool outside, the chill cutting through his threadbare coat. "Here you go, Hamid," she said, setting the bowl in front of him. Her voice was gentle, almost instinctive. "Eat before it gets cold." Hamid looked up at her with an unusual seriousness in his eyes. He took a deep breath, gripping his crutch tightly. "Aisha," he said slowly, "there's something I need to tell you. Something you won't believe at first." Aisha paused, a frown of curiosity knitting her brows. "What is it?" she asked cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron. I'm not just a beggar," Hamid whispered, leaning forward. His eyes gleamed with a strange intensity. "I am a billionaire." Aisha blinked, the words catching her completely off guard. She studied him closely, searching for a trace of jest or madness, but saw only a calm, sincere expression. The bustling cafe around them seemed to blur as her mind tried to process what he had just said. A billionaire, in tattered clothes, hunched over a crutch, sitting before her. Hamid's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "I've been watching you," he continued softly. "Watching your kindness, day after day. And I need you to know, your generosity hasn't gone unnoticed." Aisha's hands trembled slightly as she sank into the wooden chair across from him, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or simply believe the impossible. The cafe's morning bustle faded into a quiet hum as Hamid leaned closer, his crutch resting against the chair beside him. Aisha's heart raced, the earlier shock of his revelation still swirling in her mind. "A billionaire, you've been living like this?" she whispered, incredulous. Hamid nodded slowly. "Yes. Years ago, I lost almost everything in a terrible business betrayal. But I managed to keep a portion of my wealth hidden, away from the world's greed and envy. I chose this life, to observe people, to see who acts with true kindness, without expecting anything in return." His voice carried a weight that made Aisha lean in, hanging on every word. You've been testing me?" she asked, a mixture of awe and confusion in her tone. Hamid smiled faintly, his eyes shining. "Not testing, exactly, but I needed to know who I could trust, who I could believe in. And you, Aisha, have shown generosity that is rare. Every meal you've given me, every smile, every moment of care, it was all without thought of reward. That is the kind of goodness the world desperately needs." Aisha felt a lump in her throat, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. I don't even know what to say." Hamid reached out and lightly touched her hand. "Don't say anything. Just promise me one thing. That you will continue to give, not for recognition, not for reward, but because it is in your heart. That is the truest wealth a person can possess." Aisha nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. In that moment, she realized that wealth was not measured by gold or riches, but by the depth of one's compassion. A few days after their quiet conversation at the cafe, Aisha found herself standing in front of a grand mansion, the gates towering above her like a scene from a dream. The crisp morning air carried the faint scent of jasmine from the manicured gardens. She had never imagined a world like this: marble floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, walls lined with priceless paintings, and the soft murmur of water from indoor fountains. Hamid greeted her at the door, no longer hunched or weary, but radiating calm confidence. "Welcome, Aisha," he said warmly. "I wanted you to see what a different life could look like, so you could choose your path freely." Aisha's hands trembled as she stepped inside, her eyes wide with awe. Everything was so lavish, so untouched by hardship. Yet, amid the grandeur, Hamid's familiar kindness remained, the same warmth she had felt every day at the cafe. I don't know what to say," she whispered. Hamid smiled. "You don't need to say anything. I've seen your heart in its truest form. I wanted to give you a life with choices, comfort, and opportunities, things you deserve. But remember, true richness is measured not by wealth, but by the compassion you carry." Aisha felt tears sting her eyes, but this time, they were tears of joy, not sorrow. She realized that her simple acts of kindness had opened the door to a life she had never dared to dream of, but her heart remained the same. From that day forward, Aisha continued to serve, care, and share, not because of wealth or recognition, but because it was who she was. And Hamid, watching from a quiet corner, knew that his decision to live humbly had brought him not only a friend but a reminder that the smallest acts of generosity can ripple into extraordinary, life-changing consequences. Aisha had learned the greatest lesson of all: that true wealth lies not in gold, but in the goodness of the human heart.